Eagle 6 in the track.
Roger.
Viper 1 bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Welcome back to the DCS SITREP, where we bring you news and analysis of all things DCS world. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog, and this week we're looking again at more information on the planned updates to the DCS core graphics engine, known as Edge. Eagle Dynamics has indicated that Edge 2.9, the proprietary graphics for DCS World, is currently in closed testing as part of this new big update that they have planned. They indicated that 2.9 will support NVIDIA DLSS graphics enhancements. What is DLSS, you ask? Well, I'm not an expert, but I'll give you my best plain man's guide to what is a very sophisticated software/hardware architecture known as Deep Learning Supersampling Technology, or DLSS. Firstly, as the name implies or indicates clearly, this is a graphics feature only available on NVIDIA RTX cards, ray tracing cards, and indeed is restricted to 2000 series cards and above. Some of the more recent versions like DLSS 3 and just released 3.5 is actually restricted to 4 series cards or 40 series cards and certain games designed to take advantage of that particular technology. Cyberpunk, for example, being one such title, and a good example of a game manufacturer pairing up with a GPU manufacturer with enticing and exciting matings of stunning graphics in-game that you'll only see with a specific GPU. Now, over the last year or so, the list of games that support this kind of technology has grown significantly, but it certainly doesn't include, unfortunately right now, DCS World. So what is it all about? What's behind the technology? Well, inside your RTX card, and it seems strange now thinking about cards, because remember a while back it was almost impossible to get one of the bloody things with all of the data mining going on. There are rasterization cores and tensor cores. Now the rasterization cores render the game, while the tensor cores enable AI acceleration, and it is this AI acceleration that is the key to theoretically boosting your general visual performance. So tensor cores, simplistically phrased, take the frames that the rasterization cores create and uses them to improve the existing frames or even create new frames. In the early versions of the architecture, you may be aware of this or familiar with this, DLSS enabled the system to run the game at a lower frame rate and then uses tensor cores to upscale the image to a desired or target resolution. The process basically allows you to run a game at a higher frame rate without sacrificing performance, and the term for this was centered on scalability factors. Now the new hardware, or the new system DLSS 3 and 3.5, is actually able to upscale multiple frames, and the AI tensor cores then guess what should have happened in between each frame, theoretically providing major boosts in frame rates without loss of visual quality. NVIDIA calls this neural networking within the GPU. Now I say theoretically because those of you who are clearly more computer literate than me will note that the technology is not perfect. As I said before, it's only available among some titles, which are optimized for interface with the architecture and in some RTX NVIDIA cards, like I said. The other portion of the puzzle is potential CPU bottlenecks and even latency issues. Again, depending on hardware architecture and the interaction of the software with your hardware, results will vary. NVIDIA has acknowledged that there are challenges associated with denoising the images, which can create ghosting effects and blending, which muddies the crispness of, say, things like reflections, as the AI system interprets the data between the frames for reflections, refraction, and shading. These are complicated things and require a lot of processing power. With their latest 3.5 version, though, they claim to have overcome some of these issues, and games running with the architecture should see similar FPS rates running DLSS as running the game without that system operating, and still producing incredibly realistic eye candy. The reality for most of us, however, is that we end up playing a game of balance between FPS, graphical quality and the maximum available resolution your system can support. Loosely, this is defined as a performance measure for playability, in a really basic kind of term. For DCS and flight sims, though, in general, there is a peculiar challenge in finding that sweet spot, and that's because the size of the world environment being rendered is extremely large by comparison to perhaps other game environments, and also extremely complex with that large array of shadows that outdoor scenery produces of hundreds, if not thousands, of objects within the field of view. And this is why you see at, say, 30,000 feet, your game runs quite well, but then when you dip down to surface levels on a detailed map where there's a lot of shadow and reflections, you may find your system crawling like a chloroform snail. ED has tried to overcome some of these issues with the ability to render flat shadows to scale back some of the sheer processing power required and needed to run the game, especially in the old system. Under the latest Edge game engine, however, which began to tap into multi-core processing power, most of us saw significant improvements in general performance for both 2D operations, that is a 2D screen interface, and those that are running the game in VR, which gives you that 3D experience. Results again vary, and some people running fewer CPU cores with higher clock speeds, which is when the game first came out, that was the kind of the king of PC performance. You actually may see worse performance with the multi-threading operating in the game. So it's important to remember here that even settings aside, with regards to the graphics portion of the equation in DCS, the game also requires complex physics equations to properly represent the movement of air over the airframe of your plane, including the individual behavioral characteristics of an airframe. We also have weapon behavior, air density, which is affected by things like heat, cold, and humidity, as well as a myriad of other programmed influences to better represent the flight characteristics of objects within the game that fly and move. Consider things like asymmetric loadouts or flying with only some of your payload deployed, which affects again the handling of the aircraft. It's something to bear in mind before one launches into tirades over broken flight model mechanics, especially if you've never flown an aircraft, let alone the real aircraft you're flying in-game. Do you understand what parasitic drag is? Do you understand what chord is and its relationship to angle of attack? So on and so forth. All of these are complex computations that need to occur again to represent even basic flight modeling in the game. So it's incredibly difficult to recreate the sensation of mass and movement, as a real-world pilot will tell you and remind you there's no seat-of-the-pants feel in DCS world. Nonetheless, they try to do it visually, and it's very, very cool but incredibly complex number crunching stuff, which is potentially resource heavy. This is why the AI in the game are using a scaled back version of the flight model over the full fidelity aircraft, which in years past, many of you will remember, has led to the sort of weird UFO behavior people complained about from AI combatants. ED has experimented successfully with slowly tuning that back up to get more realistic AI behavior, as well as reconfiguring the algorithms for general AI behavior, or in specific theaters like BVR and BFM, but I digress. The other glaring factor I haven't really touched on is the effect of DLSS on VR headsets, which again vary in architecture, and many are not optimized for running CPU and GPU demanding games like DCS World does. In short though, I would hope that this technology will provide something of a boost in performance again for VR users. Remember that for the VR headsets, they have to render the game twice to get the stereoscopic kind of effect in each eye. It should be noted that there is open software architecture to substitute for DLSS for some VR systems. I'm not a VR user and I'm not an authority on this software or the hardware for that matter, but that's my understanding of possible workarounds for game optimization. Weigh in if you have an opinion or have experience. And what about AMD users, you ask, as I'm sure all the AMD people are questioning too. Well, AMD runs its own similar proprietary systems that match DLSS in the form of FSR and XeSS. From my understanding, this software also supports older cards in the AMD lineup, unlike NVIDIA, so that more of the NVIDIA GPUs take advantage of it. I can't provide comparative metrics, as that's a whole separate topic, and again, I'm not qualified to give you that. I'm a plain guy doing a lot of reading, trying to summarize some very complex stuff. It's certainly worth considering, though, when you're purchasing a new card or even a whole new system, decide which path to pursue, the NVIDIA path or the AMD path. And we also have Intel wading into the GPU environment, sales market here, which is currently dominated by NVIDIA and AMD. So there may be more interesting considerations to figure out in the future, but right now Intel aren't quite there yet in terms of punching weight in the big fucking GPU marketplace at the moment. Maybe that will change. So in recap, 9line indicated that the DLSS NVIDIA support should be released with the pending launch of Edge 2.9, barring what he described as any blocking issues. If it is released, those of you running RTX NVIDIA card 20 series and above should, in theory again, see some potential improvements to overall visual quality. Let me know what you think about the news of DLSS support for the game and whether I'm interpreting this information correctly. If you have an opinion or if you have more knowledge than certainly that I do, feel free to put a comment in the comments section below.
Roman 3, contact Command Center on 276.1.
Do you have a VHF freak for Roman 3?
Roman 3, standby 1.
Now, in addition to this critical feature, which represents performance improvements, ED also revealed other features coming with the 2.9 update, which in fairness has been a mixed bag of information and in some senses being a little bit drip-fed here. In the latest newsletter, they stated new voice chat features are coming with immersive radio effects. I haven't really used the in-house system, to be fair, as SRS has been pretty effective at providing that particular function for multiplayer stuff that I've done. But okay, cool. It sounds like it could be a good thing, and I'm always interested to see if that is a benefit. Let me know if you've used it and how it compares to SRS.
There you go, that was good closure. Just come up a little bit.
Data link improvements for the F16C, FA18C, A10C2, and lastly, the AH64D are on the way. Some of these features have already been showcased by WAGS, and we've discussed these briefly in prior videos, so no new surprises here. A new cinematic camera is also coming, which will be very cool for those of us making cinematic videos and other forms of entertainment for the game. Sadly, the missing overarching benefit of this is the absence, in my opinion, of a proper replay system, which currently relies on the clumsy track file system. And this was intended as a data gathering feature rather than a true replay system. If you're not familiar with why, it's kind of weird. It works only to a point, and invariably your aircraft ends up doing things you did not in the original footage. Usually it ends up crashing. And I'll accept some new camera angles for sure. And I think we get a snippet of this, or we got a snippet of this with the F-16 Aggressor skin short that Eagle Dynamics posted this week. But we definitely are in need of what I consider a traditional replay system, which records exactly kind of what happened in the game, but still allows you to move the camera around and get those exciting angles and just do a little bit more than what we can do right now. It's a very, very laborious and tedious system that we have right now. It's not very user-friendly, and I think I would love to see something a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more intuitive to get some of these really fantastic cinematics that we see. And the people that are producing those really do an amazing job, because it's not easy to do. It's very time-consuming. So, moving on to 3D models. Remember, this is something that has been talked about for quite a while and been showcased many, many months ago now. We are getting new 3D models for the B-1B Lancer, the B-52H, the S-3B, and the S-3 Viking tanker, CRAM, and the S300PS. Now, these updates, as I said, were touted quite a while ago, so it's good to see them finally being injected into the game. As part of that aesthetic makeover, ED also described broad AI behavior improvements, but we have no specifics of what they may mean by this, so we'll have to wait and see. We still have a lot of work being done on the ATC command system, I believe, because that needed to be overhauled if they're going to create a workable dynamic campaign. Again, it's a work in progress, and we don't have any updates on that particular thing. And lastly, here on the shortlist is troops can now be transported on player-controlled vehicles. This will be a combined arms edition, which is, again, pretty handy, a nice little aesthetic thing. And then lastly, they rounded off by saying, and more, which was the cliffhanger they left us with. So we shall have to wait until further notice for more information on the true depth of changes 2.9 is bringing to the game. I'm pretty excited about it. One of the things they did delve into more was the multiplayer development, which will be welcome news for many. Those of you creating campaigns or missions or setting up multiplayer servers will appreciate this. In this newsletter, they described that they have developed a new multiplayer server user interface, which is going to add more ways for you to interact and choose aircraft slots. The feature will allow you to view all aircraft spawn locations on the map and select directly from there. They're adding a filter system for the slot system, and when you select from the list, the map view will jump to that location. They are completing a new aircraft slot that will be dynamically added to the filter system based on the inventory of the airfield warehouse. This won't replace the existing slot, but is designed for the convenience of mission designers, where spawning is dynamic. Users will be able to choose aircraft type to populate parking positions automatically, and they won't need any additional placement of aircraft from the mission designer, which is kind of a nice way of creating or reducing the amount of time that it takes to create some of these missions. So when you're spawning from the dynamic slot, users will be able to choose aircraft type, hot or cold start, and all of the parameters that are available in the rearming panel. So again, for those of you making missions, this should greatly speed up the length of time it takes to generate and populate the various slots you're trying to fill. The little I have used this for testing purposes on new maps, etc., it can take a long time to properly populate a map. Usually I give up because I run out of patience. And this, as I said, is a rather tedious process. This new system will be great, and the current one that they have is not the most intuitive either. It takes quite a while to figure out exactly how to use things properly and check that all of the aircraft run properly. And it's easy to forget that it hasn't been set up for parking, and then that becomes a flyover point, and then an aircraft you thought was stationary is moving, and blah 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 blah. So it gets, as I said, quite tedious. So I'm sure that the community members that have contributed to this will benefit the most. So it's exciting to see. All right, well, this brings us to the end of another DCS SITREP. Once again, thank you for tuning in, supporting the channel, especially all the people that subscribed, provided likes and comments last week on that video. It was pretty successful. So again, I really appreciate the support. Remember too, that you have to be a subscriber to the Phantom F42 giveaway that I'm looking to do at the end of the year, because I still believe that we will see this aircraft in Q4 of this year. Remember, it's pretty much a year now since it was touted for release. I can't imagine the team will want to delay it any longer. People have asked me about other third-party updates. I don't have a whole lot right now. There really isn't a major amount of information out there on a wide variety of projects, ranging from the Corsair to the LA7, which looks like that's going to be coming here shortly, and various other Cold War jets like the Crusader, like the A72E, and or A7E2 is it? I think it is. Sorry, they had the acronyms around there wrong, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So we have lots and lots of stuff in progress, but sometimes the silence is not a matter of these teams ignoring the community, but they're just head down, tails up, trying to get things done. Remember, too, that when you have a core update as significant as 2.9, I believe, will be, then that can also influence the developmental processes for third-party developers who are tasked with keeping their products up to date with the ongoing progress in the core engine. That can also potentially cause delays, conflicts, etc., that have to be ironed out. So there is a tremendous amount of stuff bubbling away in the background. One thing I will say too is people ask me about the updates for the F-15E from RAZBAM. Notso produced a video. He's the subject matter expert and I guess the spokesperson for the F-15 for RAZBAM. He produced a great example of how the terrain following radar works in the F-15E, and a lot of people are eager to get their hands on that feature for that particular aircraft. It is one of the well-known features of that aircraft. As he pointed out too, it's not used as much because these days the pilots are using pretty sophisticated NVGs. And on that basis, the other person working hard on the F-15E is also Baltic Dragon, who is producing missions and training missions for that. Along with going over some of his campaigns, he pointed out he was actually going back through the Raven 1 campaign to fix bugs and things, and he hoped to have some of this out for the latest open beta patch, which should be in October. Whether or not we get 2.9 in October, I don't know. Remember that Eagle Dynamics has said that the engine is currently in closed testing, and then they're going to open it up to open testing. I'm not a closed beta tester at this juncture. Would be nice, but it also would be... I have enough trouble just testing some of the maps and things. I am looking at another map right now, which has been fun, and hopefully at some stage I'll be able to reveal a little bit more about that particular map. We also have the top-end Australia map that looks pretty good. It's coming along fairly nicely. So stay tuned, like I said, for more information. And I apologize I don't have just info about third-party projects like I would like to. There just isn't updates right now. And again, I think that comes back to people being very, very busy trying to wrap things up for the end of the year and making progress on the numerous modules that are out there. So thanks for the support. Thanks for all the likes and subscribes. Like I said, it helps the channel chug along. And I will be doing that giveaway for the Phantom because I still think it will be Q4 of this year. So late Q4. All right. We'll see you next time on the DCS SITREP. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. See ya!